And today is the Disappearance Day of Vrindavan Das Thakur. And I wanted to look at how Vrindavan Das Thakur, and to some extent also we'll look at Krishna Das Kaviraj, exemplifies how we should share Krishna consciousness with others. So I wanted to look at 4 points, how when we share Krishna consciousness, we should do so in following the disciplic succession, that we should do so in line with Siddhanta, that we should act as the Lord's instrument, and that we should also be getting blessings. So, Vrindavan Das Thakur is the son of Narayani, who's the niece of Srivas Thakur. Of course, there's that wonderful story of Mahaprabhu giving his prasadam to Narayani, at which point she became in ecstasy. But rather than looking a lot at Vrindavan Das Thakur's biography, I wanted to look at these verses in the Chaitanya Charitamrita where Krishna Das Kaviraj is explaining how he came to write the Chaitanya Charitamrita. And as most of you know, our family has been running a project at Radhakundan Govardhan for many years, I think 11, 12 years now. And one of the places that we have been taking care of is Manasa Pavana Ghat, which is where Srimati Radharani bathes every day at noon, and she says if you bathe there, you get the same love she has for Sri Krishna. And that area is the Bhajan Kutir of Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. There's also the Bhajan Kutir of Raghunath Das Goswami and of Krishna Das Kaviraj. And because Raghunath Das Goswami and Krishna Das Kaviraj both had their Bhajan Kutir there, so in the afternoon they would sit together and discuss the pastimes of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, which Raghunath Das Goswami had the diaries of Swarup Damodar, and that is how Chaitanya Charitamrita got to be written. But that's not the beginning of the story. So how does one decide to write transcendental literature, or how does one decide to share Krishna consciousness? What's kind of the process that we go through? We're all asked by Srila Prabhupada, exhorted, Srila Prabhupada's exhorting us, spread Krishna consciousness. The way you can repay me is to teach Krishna consciousness to others. This is, when I joined the Hare Krishna movement, I don't know if I've joined yet, but at least ostensibly I'm still trying to join, but ostensibly when I joined the Hare Krishna movement, this was one of the main things, spread Krishna consciousness to others, spread Krishna consciousness to others. When I moved in the ashram permanently, the next day, Kishore Kishori were installed, and the next day we went out doing Harinam on the streets, and the next day after that I was in O'Hare Airport. Of course, that was Hare Krishna. We were just wearing our polycotton pieces of cloth with 25 pleats, and the cloth was so heavy we had to have a safety pin to keep it on our head, and the pin would move up during the day. So we looked like this. Our great big nose rings and so forth. But this was the mood, that we should spread Krishna consciousness to everyone, even if I remember someone walking up to me in the airport and saying, you guys look like a bunch of clowns. And at first I was like, oh, and then I looked around and I thought, we actually do look like a bunch of clowns. So, but this was our mood, is somehow or other give Krishna consciousness to everyone. Right? Carry a book with you wherever you go. Somehow say the holy name to people, something. And to write also. Srila Prabhupada asked us every day, write something, and that we should write books. Yes? We should write articles, we should write books. He wanted us to write for Back to Godhead magazine. Nowadays, I'm sure if Srila Prabhupada were physically present, he'd be asking us to make videos. So somehow or other to bring Krishna consciousness to others. And that Prabhupada says that Krishna especially recognizes the preacher of Krishna consciousness. And of course, Krishna says that, he lists in the 12th chapter all the ways we can be dear to him by being equipoised and kind and so forth. But then the end of the Bhagavad Gita, he says one who shares the secret of the Bhagavad Gita with the devotees is very dear to him. So we would all like to become dear to Krishna, right? Yes? You were talking the other day about, you were asking a Purva Prabhu, answering his question about Lobha, and how does it come? Yes? And ultimately it comes from the mercy of a devotee, and the mercy of God, how the mercy of Krishna, of course, as Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains in Madhurya Kadambini, how it flows through the mercy of God flows through the mercy of the devotees. And I was really meditating on this, that, we're really begging for mercy. I was just yesterday teaching a Nectar Devotion preface through chapter 3. And Srila Prabhupada is saying that there's no sadhana to develop Krishna consciousness, really. It's not like that. It's not some mechanical process. It's a question of making oneself receptive to mercy and indicating you want mercy. Yes? You were talking yesterday, wonderful class, about friendship. And Krishna is our dear friend, Suridam Sarvabhutanam, he's our best friend. But as Ravinda Swarup so wonderfully put it, we've broken the relationship. You were saying if there's a friendship, right? You were answering the question, I think, from Krishna Priya. Are we responsible for breaking the relationship, or is the other person responsible? Of course, usually it's both. But with Krishna, it's entirely us. We have broken the relationship, Bahurmukhe. We've turned our face from Krishna. And so, as Satchidananda Maharaj likes to say, it's not so much can I trust Krishna, but can Krishna trust me? I am doing this sadhana not as a mechanical process like an Astanga yogi, that I'm going to breathe a certain way and move the life air in the Pingala and the Ida and the chakras, and I will put my body in such a way I will enter into samadhi. That's also there, of course. But more, it's just to say to Krishna, I mean it. I'm actually sorry that I am such an offender, and I really want to love you, and please accept me. Please accept me. Please accept me. I think about, the man who had an affair with 50 women, and he comes back to his wife, and he says, please take me back. And she says, oh, I'm so happy that you've asked me to take you back, but you wait outside now. There's some testing period, not just you can bring me flowers and a diamond bracelet and poof, And ultimately, it's up to the offended party to open the door, isn't it? The offender can never demand. So how are we going to get mercy? And one of the ways we are going to get mercy is to give mercy. Yes? To spread Krishna consciousness to others. So this is exemplified by Vrindavan Das Thakur, who wrote the Chaitanya Bhagavat, originally called the Chaitanya Mangala. And I'm assuming here that all of us have read the Chaitanya Bhagavat with the commentary of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. If you have not done so, I really highly recommend it. There's also audiobooks of the Chaitanya Bhagavat. And right now we're going to enter into Krishna Das Kaviraj glorifying Vrindavan Das Thakur, which is also, although I didn't list it as one of the things I'm going to focus on, a mood of non-enviousness. That Krishna Das Kaviraj isn't saying, well, he wrote a book, but I'll write a better one. That's not his mood. All right, so he starts off, we're going to read, hopefully, 33 through 49, and then in Adi 8, and then 81 through 82. Hopefully we'll get through everything. So in 33, he says, Ore mudha loka, shuna chaitanya mangala, chaitanya mahima yate janibe shakala. Oh, fools! Just read Sri Chaitanya Mangala, which was the original name of Chaitanya Bhagavat. By reading this book, you can understand the glories of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Right, I'm not going to read everything in the purport. So going into the middle of the purport. The life of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is very elaborately described in the Chaitanya Bhagavat, and Krishna Das Kaviraj Goswami has already informed us that in his Chaitanya Charitamrita, he has described whatever Vrindavan Das Thakur has not mentioned. This acceptance of Sri Chaitanya Bhagavat by Krishna Das Kaviraj Goswami indicates his acceptance of the disciplic succession. A writer of transcendental literature never tries to surpass the previous acharyas. So I think one of the things we were greatly appreciating in Hari Parshad Prabhu's classes was how faithful and chaste he is to the previous acharyas. So he's not just speaking, on his own. I mean, sometimes he might say, this is my preference, or this is my what I like to do. But every philosophical point he's making from the Acharyas. And of course, Srila Prabhupada did this as well. When everything that Srila Prabhupada did, he said, this is how it's based on Shastra. This is how it's based on the disciplic succession. I'm not inventing something. Of course, Srila Prabhupada took the principles of the disciplic succession and applied them according to time, place, and circumstance. That is also the duty of the Acharyas. But it's not necessary to invent something new. You were saying this, I think, yesterday. You know, that the wisdom is already there. It is a question of accessing it. And generally philosophers like to present something new and different, isn't it? I've come out with a new theory. And we see this, we have to speak honestly, even in our Vaishnav society. We've seen this. You know, I remember one devotee who was telling all these leelas of Krishna, and I'd never heard any of them before, and I asked him, where is this from? Oh, I travel around Vrindavan and I ask in the villages and I note down. And I was thinking, you know, that's not so stable. How do you know? How do you know? Maybe someone just made something up. You know? But, oh, I want my audience to hear something new. Actually, Krishna is ever fresh. It's not necessary to do that. We can read the same verse over and over and over, and we will always find something fresh, isn't it? We all have this experience. You read Srila Prabhupada's books over and over again, and you're thinking, I've read this purport 50 times. How is it I didn't notice this sentence here? And it just, wow, what is Srila Prabhupada saying here? And as our own spiritual life deepens, we gain so many things. So one can always have fresh and new realizations, but one doesn't need to invent something or to invent a new philosophical stance. And we have to say, we see this also. Oh, now I have understood something better than this Acharya, and I have understood something better than this Acharya. And I'm going to write a book showing how this Acharya is wrong and this Acharya is wrong, and I have a better understanding. This is actually happening. I mean, it's not... When I first came to the Krishna consciousness movement, and I was hearing so much Prabhupada's talking about the materialists, you know, the materialists. And I'm sitting in the class, and I'm thinking, yes, those materialists, they are terrible. I agree. Many months I was thinking like that, you know. And one day I woke up and I went, oh, he's talking about me. So when we read these things, it's very embarrassing. So when we read these things about following the disciplic succession, it's not just that Srila Prabhupada in this purport is talking about, you know, somebody over there. Or I remember when also hearing about the impersonalists. I'm thinking, why is Prabhupada talking so much about some Indian group somewhere? You know? Like, what does this have to do with me in Chicago? It's like, and again, you know, I'm reading right now David Haberman's book, Loving Stones, about Govardhan. Oh, what a wonderful book. And the chapter I'm in, he's going through the difficulty between the concept of worshiping Shilas, worshiping the Murti, and concepts of idolatry. And how Maimonides and the Jewish tradition really pushed impersonalism. And, you know, I was raised in a very, very impersonalistic tradition. And so again, it was like I was hearing these things, you know, the impersonalists, the impersonalists, the impersonalists, and I'm thinking, all right, you say it once, say it twice. Why you keep saying this about some obscure groups in some part of India? And again, it was like, oh, maybe this is something that I need to hear. So this following the disciplic succession, it's very important, especially as we are rightly innovating so many ways to spread Krishna consciousness. We should be doing that according to time, place, and circumstance. That's Prabhupada said it is required. But we always have to follow the disciplic succession and never think, I am greater. I know better than my guru. I know better than the previous acharyas. Then we're finished. So we see Krishna Das Kaviraj, he doesn't have this mood. He has this mood of respecting Vrindavan Das Thakur. Yes, he has. You should read his book. Just see that. He's telling everyone, read his book. Okay, going on, 34. As Vyasadeva has compiled all the pastimes of Lord Krishna in Srimad Bhagavatam, Thakur Vrindavan has depicted the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya. Thakur Vrindavan Das has composed Sri Chaitanya Mangala. Hearing this book annihilates all misfortune. So again, this is the way that we deal with the works of the previous acharyas. We glorify them. We're the servant of them. By reading Chaitanya Mangala, one can understand all the glories and truths of Lord Chaitanya Nityananda and come to the ultimate conclusion of devotional service to Lord Krishna. So if we look here at the Bengali, Chaitanya Nityarat Yate Janiye Mahima Yate Jani Krishna Bhakti Siddhantera Sima. At least I don't have to worry that I know you're not Bengali, so you're not going to be looking at my Bengali. But of course, if Rukmini's listening, she'll talk to me later about Bengali. Purport, Srimad Bhagavatam. I'm sure I just like the Bengalis listening are just going. Srimad Bhagavatam is the authoritative reference book from which to understand devotional service. But because it is very elaborate, few men can understand its purport. And Prabhupada talks in this purport, again, we're not going to read everything, about how persons think that Bhagavatam is just about Rasalila, although that's only 5 chapters in the 10th canto. And then he says, another difficulty is that professional reciters, they're teaching the Bhagavatam, but there's no heart. Then he says, under these circumstances, it is a great aid for the common man to read Srila Vrindavan Das Thakur's Chaitanya Bhagavat, for thus he can actually understand devotional service, Krishna, Lord Chaitanya, and Nityananda. And then he quotes Rupa Goswami saying this very famous verse, that devotional service that's without reference to the Shastra is simply a disturbance in society. So here we have the point, and I believe it's made in the next verse as well, yes. In the next verse, 37, again, Krishnadas Kaviraj is using this word, Siddhanta. And the verse is, in Sri Chaitanya Mangala, later known as Sri Chaitanya Bhagavat, Srila Vrindavan Das Thakur has given the conclusion and essence of devotional servants, Sara is essence, by quoting the authoritative statements of Srimad Bhagavatam. And of course, Krishnadas Kaviraj does this as well. Throughout the Chaitanya Charitamrita, he's quoting verses from the Bhagavatam. Or we see Rupa Goswami's book, right, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. He's quoting so many sources. He's quoting Bhagavatam. He's quoting so many other sources. And everything is in line with Siddhanta. So Siddhanta can mean, Siddha means perfection, Anta means end. What is the perfectional end? So Siddhanta can mean an ordinary conclusion, like which park do you want to walk in today? And you discuss which park you want to walk in today. Do I want to go to Riverwalk? Do I want to go to Poets Walk? And we discuss it and we reach a conclusion. So you can say that's a conclusion. Or we're having a discussion on something philosophical. And we're discussing philosophy. Or you were talking about the killing of not killing and killing of Aswatthama. So there was a conclusion. You have to kill a murderer, but you can't kill a Brahmana, and he's the son of your teacher, and there's, you made a promise to Draupadi, and you have to satisfy Bhima, and there were all these, and then there's a conclusion. So Siddhanta can mean there's like that, but it can also mean truths that are universal, eternal, and transcontextual. As Krishna says in the last verse of the Chatur Shloki, this should be known in all places, in all times, and all people. So what are the truths that are eternal, universal, and transcontextual? They're always true in all times and all places, for all beings, in all circumstances. And however we present Krishna consciousness, it cannot contradict that. It cannot contradict that. So that means we need to know what is the Siddhanta. Right? I mean, there can be different presentations of details according to different acharyas and different sanghas, different moods, different emphasis, but everything has to be in line with Siddhanta. It cannot contradict something that's eternally and universally true. Now, having said that, it was interesting in reading this section from Professor Haberman, and he was talking about how so much violence was done in the name of destroying idolatry by the Christians. You know, today everybody talks about Muslim terrorists, and they forget that some of the greatest terrorists in the world were Christians. What to say? And the terrorism was done in the name of destroying idolatry. So many times in different religious systems, they fixate on a particular understanding of eternal, universal, and transcontextual truth that is actually not so, that is actually skewed, that is their wrong interpretation. Because if we are a conditioned soul, we have 4 defects. That's another one. It took me a while to understand that it was also about me. Oh, I am also illusioned. I'm also a cheater. I like this in the 8th verse of Manashiksha. I am a cheater. I make mistakes. This is about me. When you study at the postgraduate level about the problems of empiricism, one of them is we have cultural biases and we have individual biases. And we are going to see things through these lenses without being aware of it. You know, when I go to India, there are certain cultural things that I find absolutely shocking. Still when I go, there's certain things. Like public defecation on the side of the road. I just like, how can you do that? You know, and I'm sure when Indians come to the West and they see people in what we call PDA, they also go, how can you do that? But this is our particular cultural bias, you know. As a Westerner, PDA is normal, and public defecation is abominable. The other, and so we tend to see like that, and we may think this is true. This is the truth, and it may not be. So this is another reason why we want to follow the previous acharyas. We want to follow liberated souls, because I am going to impose my ideas of what is true and what is right on things. And I won't even know that I'm doing it. I'll be thinking like that. Well, of course it's true. It's obvious. That's another one of the faults of empiricism. The light of reason. Oh, this is obvious. But it's not obvious to someone else. You know, the Britishers who came to India and saw people worshiping stones, they're like, it's obvious foolishness. It's obvious. So everything should be in line with what is universally true, eternally true, and true for all persons. So what's something that's universally, eternally, transcontextually true? The Vedas, because they are the breathing of the Lord. No? What else? Birth? No, I'm going to. I beg to disagree. When the universe is not manifested, there's no death. The spiritual world is no death. So, Ishvara Parama Krishna. Yes. Anything else? It's true always, in all places, for all beings. No exceptions. You can't find one counterexample. In logic, if you make a general statement, you disprove it with one counterexample. So what else is always true? The holy name. Anything else? Vivarasvarapaya Krishnara Nityadasa. That all living entities are servants. I was just hearing Prabhupada talk about this morning. How you can see this, that everyone is serving somebody. Right? The husband is serving the wife is serving the husband, everybody's serving somebody, serving their dog. What else? If everything we say and write has to be in line with Siddhanta, it's probably a good idea to know what it is. Everything which is in Dasamula Tattva. So, some of those are Vishnu Supreme. Anything else? Bhakti is the topmost process. It's interesting that you will find most religions of the world have some version of this. Right? Like Jesus said, what is the best thing is to love God. And there was also, what was his name? Oh, I forget his name. Very famous Jewish scholar. When he was asked, what is the Torah? Can you say the Torah in one sentence? He said, to love God and love your neighbor as yourself. Same thing, Jesus. So this essence. And of course, love means activity. Love means service. Love isn't just, I love you. Would you get me a glass of water? I love you. It means that there's some service. There's some action. The jiva is the part and parcel of God. And coming to your birth, death, and old age and disease, there are liberated and conditioned souls. So these are eternal truths. And whatever we say should not contradict those. They should be in line with them. And not only not contradict, but they should be helping people to come to those. Now, that doesn't mean that we're always speaking directly on those. Sometimes we are leading people to those. Does this make sense? Like I heard you yesterday, you and your good wife were speaking to those guests. When I was walking in, you were talking about the 4 regulated principles. So that's leading people to the absolute truth. Right? That is not the absolute truth, but it is leading people to the absolute truth. Don't have illicit sex, don't gamble, don't take intoxication, don't eat meat. Yeah? So this is extremely important. And this was exemplified by Vrindavan Das Thakur. You know when you're reading Chaitanya Bhagavat, you're reading something in line with Siddhanta. And this is text 38. If even a great atheist hears Sri Chaitanya Mangala, he immediately becomes a great devotee. So should we read Chaitanya Mangala? Does it sound like a good idea? Yeah. I have some hope. I mean, this is true for the books of the realized souls. Isn't it a fact? Like Prabhupada told Shrutakirti, he said, just read one chapter, one page, one sentence, one word. Yes? Or do you just look at the paintings? This is the idea, that our taste, we were talking yesterday in our Nectar Devotion class, what is the qualification for taking up bhakti? And Rupa Goswami says the main qualification is taste. One has some taste, one has some interest. Right? Like one devotee I know, he's driving an Uber and he's playing devotional music in his car. And he also has some books. And he asked the passengers, he doesn't ask, he said, if they say, oh, I like the music, what music is that? Then he says, do you like to read? And if they say yes, he gives them a book. So he sees if there's some taste. If they say, oh, that's nice music. But where do we get this taste? By association. We have it eternally, but where does it come from? Association. It comes from association. We associate with someone who has a taste, and then by their association, we get a little of their taste, even if it's just an abas at first. And then we go, oh, what is that? What is that? That is something different than I have ever had. The quality is different. So therefore, you don't even have to be in the physical presence. You just read the book of Vrindavan Das Thakur. This is his disappearance day, anniversary. He's disappeared so long ago, but we just read his book, and his taste, his enthusiasm, his greed is infused into the book. It's not just technically that he's following the previous acharyas and technically that he's following Siddhanta. His love for Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, his love for Lord Nityananda, it's permeating it. Like you take some cloth, you put it in dye, and it permeates the cloth. And so we come near it and we feel it, and then it awakens that in ourselves. Oh, I like that. I want that. And therefore, even if you're an atheist, you can become a great devotee. Now this one also, this is 39. The subject matter of this book is so sublime that it appears that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has personally spoken through the writings of Vrindavan Das Thakur. And here Srila Prabhupada in the purport writes about, again, you're following the conclusions of the Shastra, but you also have to be empowered. He says the secret in a devotee's writing is that when he writes about the pastimes of the Lord helps him. He does not write alone. And all of us who spread Krishna consciousness have this experience over and over. Isn't it correct? How many times somebody's asked me a question and my initial response is, I don't know, and then all of a sudden I know. Yes, you've all had this experience. Or we're writing an article or book, and then you just know. It just becomes clear. You know that Krishna is there, and you feel that. And it's interesting, in material life, if someone is using me, that's unpleasant. But when Krishna is using us as his instrument, that is the highest ecstasy. And so our preaching should be like that. We should be praying for empowerment. And still, our own individual flavor is there, isn't it? Krishna's using me doesn't mean I become just like a robot. But it's this wonderful reciprocation between the Lord and the devotees. So Prabhupada also writes here, the Krishnadas Kaviraj wrote Chaitanya Charitamrita in old age, but it's a sublime literature. And so, Srila Prabhupada, so sweet here. He says, we are trying to present Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita in English and do not know how successful it will be, but if one reads the original Chaitanya Charitamrita in Bengali, he will relish increasing ecstasy in devotional service. This mood of humility. I offer millions of obeisances under the lotus feet of Vrindavan Das Thakur. No one else could write such a wonderful book for the deliverance of all fallen souls. Narayani eternally eats the remnants of the food of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Srila Vrindavan Das Thakur was born of her womb. And there's some description here of who Narayani was in Krishna Lila. That she was the younger sister of Krishna's nurse. What a wonderful description he has given of the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya. Anyone in the three worlds who hears it is purified. And I want to jump now to verse 81. Krishnadas Kaviraj writes, I took permission from Srila Vrindavan Das Thakur by praying at his lotus feet, and upon receiving his order, I have attempted to write this auspicious literature. Srila Prabhupada's purport. Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj took permission not only from the Vaishnavas and Madan Mohan, but also from Vrindavan Das Thakur, who is understood to be the Vyas of the pastimes of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in 82. Srila Vrindavan Das Thakur is the authorized writer on the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya. Without his mercy, therefore, one cannot describe these pastimes. So this is also very important in our preaching, that we get blessings. That we get blessings. We get blessings from our spiritual master, from the senior devotees, from those who have gone before us. And this is true, even Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu did this, isn't it? Before he would take some action, he would get the blessing and permission of the devotees. And he's Swarat, he's the most independent. But this should also always be our mood. Like you were talking about different types of japa, and if one wants to chant in this way, one should get the instruction and blessings of one's guru. And again, this is important in so many of our stages and development of spiritual life. But it's also very important in our presentation of Krishna consciousness. So if we think, oh, I want to present Krishna consciousness in this way, or I want to present Krishna consciousness in this way, or I want to write this, or I want to speak that, to actually get blessings. So these are some of the things that we can learn from meditating on Vrindavan Das Thakur, that in our presentation to follow the disciplic succession, to keep everything in line with Siddhanta, to act as the Lord's instrument, to be enthused with the instruction of the Lord from within, and to always receive the blessings. And if we do that, then we will be very dear to Krishna. Then we will experience great happiness in our own presentation of Krishna consciousness, and everyone else will also become happy. And then it will not just be that, you know, when they're talking about the materialists and the impersonalists, that we will say, oh, that also applies to me. But also when our acharyas are talking about how enlivened one is in Krishna consciousness, and how the words of the devotees can defeat even the atheists, we will say, oh yes, that also can apply to me. So we have 2 minutes. If anybody has questions, comments, additions, subtractions, or chastisements. Yes, Dayavir Prabhu.
I was just actually reading the Chaitanya Bhagavat, and in the second chapter, Bhaktisiddhanta said that we're trying to help people develop the qualification to be able to see, have the darshan of the Lord.
Yes.
So that's the words he put in. Basically what you've been saying the whole
time. What a beautiful way to say it, yeah. To help people get the qualification to get the darshan of the Lord.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Radha Golokananda ki jai.